You're listening to Answering Difficult Questions Biblically, a Sunday school series taught by Pastor Dan Christians at Maple City Baptist Church in Chatham, Ontario. For more information about Maple City, please visit us online at maplecitybaptistchurch.com.
Okay, question number 8. If Pilate set Jesus free, what would that mean for salvation? So let's say Pilate's up there and you can see him wrestling, right? He pulls Jesus aside a couple times and he's asking him about what truth is and why doesn't fight and all of these things. And ultimately he says, I believe this man is innocent. And he doesn't want anything to do with Jesus being crucified. He washes his hands to prove it, but then he still sends Jesus to be crucified. What if he had just an ounce more courage and said, I don't believe he's worthy of crucifixion, and so he goes free? What then? Pardon?
Salvation will never happen.
And salvation would never happen. All right? Is that ultimately the case? Well, again, I think this goes back to the same thought of Jesus was crucified before the world began, before he was founded. God knew he knew the fall would occur. He knew all of the plan because he's not bound by time like we are. So he was already there. So this is one of those theoretical questions that I'm not sure can be properly answered because it's not a real life question, right? It's not possible that the things that God already knew would occur don't occur. So it'd be like saying, well, let's look at the book of Revelation. It says Jesus will come back again and he's going to rule and reign. But what if God decides that Jesus isn't going to come back? Well, he's not going to, because he wrote it down and he never changes, because his plan can never fail. So because of who God is, things can't ever be other than they will be. That does not remove, again, our free will. It doesn't mean that you don't make real life decisions that, and when we think of they alter the course of history, what we mean is, as travelers, they alter the path that we knew we were taking or that we were going on at this time. It doesn't mean that as God, he's like, oh, I didn't see that one coming. I've got to readjust all my plans and pull some different strings so that the end is the way it's going to be. He always knew that you were going to adjust course, right? And he always knew what Pilate was going to decide. Without forcing Pilate to make that decision, or Judas to make that decision, he already knew it. And it was already a part of the plan that can never change. And I definitely, the first part of that Jesus did not, nobody took Jesus' life. It says that he gave it. I think that's really important to understand that he gave it. He chose to do this, and so it was going to happen. Now, the second part where it's like, well, if Pilate chose not to, maybe there would be another option. That's the part that I think if we start thinking that way, we don't fully understand the idea of God's omniscience and him being not bound by time. So that would lead to open theism, if you ever heard of open theism. But this idea that the future is open, but God is still like pulling strings and he knows, how free will human beings are going to react in any given circumstance, so he can kind of decipher the path that it's going to go. But I don't believe in open theism. I don't think that the future is open-ended. I think that all of it is already decided because God knows all things, past, present, and future. So we can say, well, if not this, then this, but that doesn't fully, that's true maybe from a traveler's perspective, but ultimately it was always this and could never be anything other than this. You're making the decisions, and at every point God knows the decision you make. Yes, good. Okay. I didn't actually read any of the verses. Actually, maybe this is helpful. I'll read a couple. In Acts chapter 2, verse 22, Paul says this. He says, "You men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs, which God did by them in the midst of you, as you yourselves also know. Him, being delivered by the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God, you have taken and by wicked hands have crucified and slain." So in the same verse, you've got this idea that God is sovereign and that he has a determinate counsel and foreknowledge that this was going to happen, and that they are culpable because they, by wicked hands, have slain. Again, in Acts 4:26, the kings of the earth stood up. The rulers were gathered together against the Lord and against his Christ. For of a truth against the holy child Jesus, whom thou hast anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate with the Gentiles and the people of Israel were gathered together for to do whatsoever thy hand and thy counsel determined before to be done. So you've got both of those ideas. You've got this idea that all of the rulers were gathered together against Jesus, and Pontius Pilate and others were there against Jesus. The people of Israel gathered together of their own accord. And they were there to accomplish what God had before preordained would occur. Right? Okay. So, we conclude with this idea: as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are God's ways, my ways, higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Isaiah 55:9. Keep that in mind, right? God's far bigger and far greater than we can ever even begin to comprehend or imagine. And so it makes a whole lot of sense that it's hard for us as fragile human beings to understand how he works out his plan. And if you try, you will spend your life trying to figure it out, to no avail. It's going to be this mystery, and so what we need to do is recognize what the Bible teaches and believe it, and know that we will never fully fit all the pieces together in a way that makes sense for us yet.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to learn more about what you've just heard, or are interested in the ministry of Maple City, please visit our website at maplecitybaptistchurch.com.